I was 22 when it happened. I worked at a small convenience store in a quiet town, the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen until it did. One evening, I returned from a short vacation, refreshed and ready to get back to my routine. But the moment I stepped inside, a coworker pulled me aside with an odd look, mentioning that a man had been coming around every day for a week asking for me. The description was vague, mid-20s, a little off, but something about it made my stomach twist. The hours passed, and the coworker returned with urgency, saying that the man was back again. In the back room, the security monitors showed him standing near the entrance, swaying slightly. His presence felt wrong, though his face was unfamiliar. Despite the unease clawing at my chest, I stepped out to see what he wanted. The moment I approached, the overwhelming scent of alcohol hit me. He slurred his words as he explained that he had seen me on TV and wanted to ask me out. Trying to defuse the situation, I lied about having a boyfriend. He lingered, his presence unnervingly persistent, even as I walked away. Hours later, the cameras still showed him outside, watching. I left through the back exit, my skin crawling. The following day, he was waiting again, a wide grin stretching across his face as I approached the store. He followed too closely, shadowing my steps. He asked me out again, ignoring my earlier response. When I turned away, he continued to follow, weaving himself into my routine, acting as though he belonged there. Every time I checked the security monitors, he was just outside, waiting. The unease deepened, pressing against my ribs like a weight. Soon, I asked a male coworker to walk me to the tram at night. The feeling of being watched unbearable. The days blurred into weeks. He never left. Fear settled into my bones. Desperate to deter him, I asked my brother to drop me off on his motorcycle, hoping the sight of an apparent boyfriend would send him away. It didn't work. The messages started soon after, prying into my life. He knew about my supposed boyfriend. He dismissed it, suggesting secrecy as if it were an option. Panic tightened around me. The realization hit. He had my phone number. A coworker, naive and unaware of the danger, had given it to him, believing he was a friend. Rage and terror collided inside me. The store became a battleground, a place where he lurked, where his presence was an inescapable shadow. Then, suddenly, he was gone. The absence should have been a relief, but the silence felt unnatural, a pause before something worse. And then it happened. One morning, while changing in the back room, a passing comment from a coworker mentioned a new hire. The moment I stepped out, my blood ran cold. The new employee stood before me, smiling, a smile that had haunted my days for weeks. The realization hit like a punch. He had found a way inside. My voice barely worked as I pointed out who he was, but my boss dismissed it, insisting that avoiding shifts together would be enough. It was a lie. No matter what aisle I walked down, he was there. He never spoke, never acknowledged the boundary I tried to place, only followed, only stared. During lunch breaks, I sat by the security monitor, gripping my fork with trembling hands as the screen showed him standing nearby, watching me eat, unmoving, unblinking. The fear dug into my skin like claws. Every shift felt like an endurance test, every step shadowed by something I couldn't shake. It wasn't just unsettling, it was suffocating. One night, inventory ran late. The store was nearly empty, only a few employees remaining. The air felt heavier than usual, the silence pressing against my ears. Stepping into the back room to grab a clipboard, I noticed the overhead lights flickering, common in the old building, yet the timing felt wrong. The faint sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, deliberate and slow. Turning toward the security feed, I searched for movement, scanning the empty aisles. There he was, standing near the storage area, his body unnaturally still. The screen glitched. When it stabilized, he was gone. A sickening chill crawled up my spine. The store was too quiet. The weight of an unseen presence settled over me, a whisper so faint it might have been imagined, brushed against the silence. The feeling of being watched intensified, suffocating and inescapable. Every instinct screamed to run, to get out before something worse happened. Moving quickly, I found my manager, muttering an excuse to leave early, unable to shake the sensation clinging to my skin. That night, a message arrived. The words sent a shudder through my bones. He had noticed, he had seen the fear, and he wanted to know why I had run. Sleep became a distant memory. The next day, I made my decision. Finding my boss, I pointed out the unmistakable scent of alcohol on him. It was enough. He was fired. Just like that, the nightmare ended. But did it really? Even months later, the fear lingered. Some nights, in the quiet, I felt the weight of unseen eyes. A shadow at the edge of the street. A figure just beyond the reach of the streetlights. Never close enough to be certain. Never far enough to forget. Because some things never really leave you. And sometimes, the worst horror isn't what happens. It's knowing that somewhere, someone is still watching. I first met him during my first semester in college. It was a small campus in a quiet town, the kind of place where everyone knew each other at least by face. He introduced himself as Nick, a transfer student with an unusual accent. He claimed he was from Eastern Europe, which explained the slightly off way he pronounced certain words. He was friendly, though a bit intense, and seemed eager to make friends. At first I thought nothing of it. We exchanged numbers after meeting at a gathering organized by a mutual acquaintance, Josh. For the next few weeks our conversations were sporadic, nothing too deep or personal. Then one evening in early October, things took a strange turn. I had been at an event on campus with a friend, enjoying a night out without much thought. It wasn't too late when we left, but darkness had settled over the streets. I had mentioned to Nick earlier that I was craving something sweet, and maybe I would stop by the convenience store on my way home to grab some orange juice. I didn't think twice about sharing that detail. It was casual conversation. But when my friend and I stepped into the store, he was already there. He acted surprised to see me, but something about the way he immediately offered to buy my drink unsettled me. I declined, and his demeanor shifted. His friendly smile faded, and he walked away without another word. Outside, I noticed he was still lingering near the entrance as we left. My dorm was just across the street, and I could feel his eyes on me as I entered the building. Instead of ignoring the situation like I should have, I found myself opening my window and calling out to him. I felt guilty for rejecting his offer and wanted to smooth things over. He seemed pleased by the attention, and we talked briefly. Then he asked something strange. If he could flirt with me. His tone was off, as if it were some kind of game. I laughed it off, unsure how to respond. But that wasn't the worst mistake I made. Feeling bad, I went outside to talk to him in person. At first, he was normal. He asked about my classes, my interests. Then, as the night grew colder, he suggested going inside. I agreed, not yet realizing the weight of my decision. The moment we were alone in my dorm, everything changed. His entire demeanor shifted. His accent was gone. His expression became vacant, his stare unwavering. He stopped blinking. The way he laughed sent a chill down my spine. It was low, deliberate, unnatural. That was when he admitted he had lied about everything. He wasn't from another country. He was from this very state. I was trapped, too stunned to react as he talked about the bad things he had done, as if testing how much fear he could instill in me. His words twisted in ways I couldn't quite process, subtle threats hidden beneath casual confessions. He told me he could give me names, people who had evidence against him. He pulled out several IDs from his wallet, each with a different name, flipping through them as if they were playing cards. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel my body tensing. He grabbed me in an embrace that felt too tight, too unnatural. I had to demand he let go of me multiple times before he finally did. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. Then he spoke again, this time slower, deliberate. Do you want to know how insecure the locks on your door really are? My stomach twisted into knots. I managed to get him to leave, but as I locked my door, I watched through the peephole. He didn't walk away. He just stood there, staring at my door for an uncomfortably long time before finally disappearing into the hallway. After that night, he was everywhere. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Then, I started to notice the pattern. No matter where I went on campus, he wasn't far behind. I would catch glimpses of him from the corner of my eye, lurking just beyond my line of sight. My friend Josh noticed it too. He started walking with me everywhere, always keeping an eye on the shadows. One day, he casually mentioned that he had started carrying a knife. That was when I realized just how serious the situation had become. Nick would appear at random moments, standing too close, whispering unsettling things whenever he had the chance. He didn't need to say much, just knowing he was always there was enough to make my skin crawl. I stopped feeling safe anywhere. My dorm was supposed to be my refuge, but even that was compromised. For weeks I would wake up in the middle of the night feeling like I was being watched. Then, one evening, I caught sight of him standing in the shadows outside my window, just beyond the reach of the streetlights. He wasn't moving, just staring up. My blinds had been left slightly open. I couldn't breathe. I crawled out of bed as quietly as possible and shut them completely. When I peeked through again, he was gone. I never told anyone about that moment, but after that night, he stopped lingering outside my dorm. I later found out that Josh had reported him to the RA. They banned him from entering the building. I thought it was over. I blocked his number. Months passed without incident. Then, just as I was ready to forget, he resurfaced. I learned through another girl on campus that Nick had a history. A long one. She told me that before transferring to our school, he had stalked her at a community college. When she found out he had followed her to our university, she had gone straight to the administration. They told her that since the stalking didn't happen here, there was nothing they could do. He was still an RA, still in a position of power. When I reported my experience to the campus police, they barely listened. They jotted down the details half-heartedly, mixing up parts of my story with others who had come forward. When I met with the dean of students, I realized how much of a mess the reports had become. There were more victims, some that even claimed he got physical. I saw him on campus last week. Despite everything, he was still here, walking among us as if nothing had ever happened. He even smiled at me, like he was enjoying some private joke. If he ever tries to contact me again, I'll get a no-contact order. But for now, we're all being sent home for break. That will give me time to breathe. It's frustrating. There's no justice in this, no satisfying conclusion. But if nothing else, I hope this serves as a warning. Trust your instincts. Don't second-guess yourself when someone makes you uncomfortable, because sometimes the danger is closer than you think. 6 years ago, I was a new mom, juggling my job, my family, and my health. My social life existed mostly online, and Facebook and Instagram were the main ways I stayed connected with people. One evening, I received a friend request from someone named Daniel. The name was familiar, an old classmate from high school, so I accepted without much thought. Everything seemed normal at first. He liked my posts, occasionally left a comment, and didn't do anything that raised red flags. A few months later, Daniel sent me a message. It was a simple, "Hey, how have you been?" I responded, expecting a casual exchange, but something felt off. The way he talked, the things he remembered, it didn't align with the Daniel I knew. After some digging, I realized this wasn't my old classmate at all. They just happened to share the same first and common last name. I checked his profile again. His picture wasn't of himself, and his posts were vague. But we had mutual friends, and he hadn't done anything particularly strange, so I let it go. He would message me from time to time, mostly small talk. He seemed socially awkward but harmless, so I kept my responses polite but brief. Then one day, he texted me. I had never given him my number. When I asked how he got it, he said he found it on my art website. That made sense. I had listed my contact details there for business inquiries. Still, something about it unsettled me. At first, his texts were harmless. He talked about his life, his job, his new boyfriend. He mentioned he was one of the few gay conservatives and often ranted about politics. I made it clear I wasn't interested in political debates and kept the conversations neutral. Then the messages became increasingly inappropriate. He started asking if I wanted to hear about the sex parties he and his boyfriend hosted. I shut it down immediately, told him it was inappropriate, and stopped responding. Then one day, I checked my phone to find dozens of unread messages from him. Some were angry, accusing me of ignoring him. Others were filled with explicit, graphic details of his so-called experiences. That was it. I told him I had been kind to him because he seemed lonely, but I wasn't comfortable with this. I blocked him on social media and on my phone. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Not long after, I started getting friend requests from accounts with no mutual friends, no profile pictures. Some had names that were barely readable, a string of random letters or a strange mix of words. I knew they were fake, most likely him, and I blocked them without engaging. Then came the phone calls, unknown numbers at odd hours. Sometimes I answered, only to hear silence or strange breathing before the call cut off. I changed my number. The call stopped for a while, but the friend requests and messages from burner accounts continued. Then he started reaching out to my friends, my family, even my colleagues. I warned everyone to block him. Things escalated when my art page was flooded with obscene comments, crude insults, and slander. Among the fake accounts, he had accidentally posted from his real one. A message soon followed, an apology. He said he missed our friendship and just wanted my attention. I didn't respond. I blocked him again and contacted the police. They told me there wasn't much they could do. For a while, it seemed like things had calmed down. But one night, I woke up around 2 a.m. for no particular reason. I lay in bed, scrolling through my phone, when I heard something from the living room. A faint scratching sound. It came and went, light and deliberate. My first thought was that my cats were up to something. I got up, walked down the dark hallway, and flipped on the living room light. The noise stopped instantly. I scanned the room, my eyes adjusting. Then I saw it. One of the large windows was open, only by a few inches, but enough to make my stomach drop. The lock was broken. The edges of the window frame bore deep pry marks. My breath caught in my throat. Someone had tried to get in. I ran back to the bedroom, woke my husband, grabbed my son, and called the police. Deep down, I knew who it was. There was no proof, but it was too much of a coincidence. The police arrived, took statements, but without evidence, there was nothing they could do. They did, however, speak to him. That seemed to scare him enough to stop, at least for a while. But I still didn't feel safe. I started digging, trying to find out more about him. I eventually came across his YouTube channel. He posted angry, red-faced rants, his voice rising to near screams about politics, about how the world was against him. In one video, he showed off his gun collection, his fingers tightening around each weapon as he spoke about dealing with people who crossed the line. My blood turned cold. Then I found his real last name. I searched it online and found something even worse. 2 years prior, he had been arrested for holding a woman against her will in a hotel. She had managed to escape, but not before he left her with a bloody lip. We moved soon after that. I wanted neighbors close by, not isolation. I removed my contact information from my site, locked down all my social media, and changed my habits. Even now, I still sleep with a baby monitor in my son's room. I still double-check every lock before bed. His YouTube channel eventually disappeared, and I haven't heard from him since. But every now and then, late at night, when the house is quiet, I think I hear something outside. A soft, deliberate scratching against the window.